just like your promise. Angel of mercy, you come to no harm. Angel of mercy, there's no need for alarm. Knight in his armor, wants a knight in your arms. You know he's on it. Angel of mercy, angel delight. Give him my reward in a heaven tonight. And if I give up my soul, won't you give me the right, sweet angel?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to go ahead and get started, and we'll start today like we've started our other 2 days with our Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please take your seats. So day 3, and it's going to be a jam-packed day in here with lots of speakers, panels, and then we've got our classified session for the group that can make it out there. And so just watch your time, and we will keep things rolling along today. And to start us off, our chairman of the symposium, Mr. Chris Beasley.
Good morning, everybody. How y'all doing out there? Great. You got to make a lot more noise because some of your friends haven't come in from the exhibit hall yet. So please fill in for them verbally, if nothing else. Well, good morning and welcome back to day 3 of the 2015 Cyberspace Symposium. We hope you enjoyed our interesting and fun-filled day yesterday. We start out with a very mentally challenging presentation by Lieutenant General Bob Allardyce, retired, who made you think about what century you were in. We followed that up with the ever-popular industry panel led by Lieutenant General retired Harry Radke. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. They had some really thought-provoking discussions, and as General Hyten pointed out, they used different language than many people do. They used 21st century language, so we challenge you to do that. We also had General Hyten speak at lunch, and that was really fun. He talked about way back in time when we had Phase 4 mainframe computers, which unfortunately I actually even remember. But he also brought forth the JIE and the Combat Mission Forces and all the other new changes that are going on in the cyber domain. And that was a really good lunch as well to go with it. In the afternoon, we had we had one panel led by Greg Tuhill and all of the folks from Secret Service and the FBI, all of the interesting discussions about sharing intelligence and information and how do we do that in today's cyber world. And then we closed out the day with Lieutenant General Bill Bender, the Air Force A6, and also a fan of the Buffalo Bills, poor man. But he gave a really great talk on the future of where we're headed with the Air Force and CIO's perspective and the A6's perspective. Last night, I hope you had a great chance to socialize. We had a lot of opportunities to do that, some great food and great times. Today, we're going to continue that whole theme of interesting and challenging and fun things. This morning, we're going to kick it off with a presentation by the 24th Air Force Commander, Maj Gen Ed Wilson. He's going to update you on the wonderful and interesting challenges he faces every day as Air Force Cyber and 24th Air Force Commander. We've then got an interagency panel led by Rear Admiral Dwight Shepard, who will be representing NORAD Northcom. He is the J6 there. And he also has a mix of people who will discuss some of the real challenges of communications across the different agencies. And then finally, we have a new twist this year. We brought out a panel of rising cyber leaders. And we have our very own Chad Radke. Colonel Chad Radke is going to moderate that. And then we have some young folks who are going to provide a perspective that maybe not all of us have. So we hope you enjoy that panel. After that panel finishes at noon, that will be the conclusion of the unclassified portion. And at that point, the exhibit hall will close, and we will transition those who have been invited and successfully passed your clearance will be able to go over to CyTor and listen into our afternoon secret US-only presentations. For those of you that are going, if you haven't signed up for the bus, you're a little late, but there's a couple of seats left, so you can go right out in the lobby at the DV table and sign up. Or you can get a map if you haven't already got a map. We need you to be at SciTour no later than 12:45 if you're driving yourself. If you're taking the bus leaves at 12:30 from right out front of Broadmoor Hall, so be there, or you can call a taxi. The classified session includes a presentation by Major General Steve Denker, Air Force Space Command A236, and then followed by a panel, acquisition and programs panel, led by Major General Craig Olson, Air Force PEO for C3 and N. So that, at the end of that session, will wrap up the actual symposium itself, and we hope that this has been a great and fulfilling time for you all here. We look forward to having that great day. If you've got comments, remember we've got the app with the surveys on it, or you can go to our website and do the surveys from the website. We really appreciate your feedback. We've also got our Twitter handle. I mentioned this yesterday, but it's at AFCEA_symposium. We have our Facebook account, which is Cyberspace Symposium, so please like us there, or I don't think they have a dislike button, but at least, check off that you saw us. I mentioned the app, and we've had a contest to see who might win the iPad 3 mini, and I will tell you that it was pretty successful. We had over 350 people download the app. We had almost 200 people apply for the iPad mini, and I'm proud to tell you that Staff Sergeant Patrice Jones of the U.S. Air Force won that iPad mini. So congratulations. Oh, there she is right there. Congratulations. Stand up for a second. See, if you win, it's great to be in front of everything. She downloaded the app and she went in the contest. Thank you, Patrice. We also still have t-shirts, so go to the General Dynamics booth or the FCA booth and get your t-shirt. And finally, I'd like to have you mark your calendars. The 2016 symposium, I know it's a long ways away, and right now it feels like we don't really want to have one. I just want a beer. But the 2016 symposium will be the 1st through the 4th of February. The 1st will be our training day again, and the symposium itself will run the 2nd through the 4th. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, I'd like to introduce Cadet 3rd Class Austin McWhirter, who will introduce General Ed Wilson. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Cadet 3rd Class Austin McWhirter from the United States Air Force Academy. I'm a computer network security major, and I'm hoping to get into the 17th Sierra cyber field. I recently competed in the Cyber Stakes cyber competition, and we are currently preparing for the CCDC competition coming up. Our next speaker, Major General Ed E. Wilson, graduated from the Air Force Academy with a degree in electrical engineering. From there, he's served on the staff of Air Force Space Command, 24th Air Force, the National Reconnaissance Office, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, and the former U.S. Space Command. He is currently the commander of the 24th Air Force and of Air Force's Cyber Joint Base San Antonio, Lackland, Texas. Ladies and gentlemen, Major General Ed E. Wilson.
Awesome. Appreciate it. So for those that were in the audience yesterday with General Hyten, you notice how he kind of winced when 1981 was mentioned when the introduction. Did you notice Austin didn't do that? Yeah, good stuff. So Austin's in the class of 2017, and we were just chatting in the back. I'm an 85 grad out of the academy. It's amazing. So they just got back from the computer competition, the cyberspace competition. And he didn't mention, but the team racked up a whole bunch of medals. They brought back a lot of hardware. So took first in almost every division they competed in. I was almost wincing when I was comparing notes with him is that in our class, we were the last class that came through the academy and didn't have personal computers. We had typewriters and calculators and slide rules, So it's kind of amazing in one lifetime, half a lifetime really, the changes that we've seen. So So I'm just really proud to be here this morning. Thank you for doing this. And hats off, we keep saying it again and again, but to the Rocky Mountain chapter for putting on just a tremendous event. It's my honor to be able to represent the 14,000 or so cyber warriors of the 24th Air Force, and we present as part of Air Force's cyber. And look forward to rolling through some thoughts, share some thoughts, and then field questions. I always find that's the most invigorating part, is in the Q&A. So looking forward to kicking off with that. Before we start, I just want to give you, if I could get, actually I have the clicker, I'm sorry. Just to give you, as we begin the discussion, three logos up here, just to set the stage in terms of where we're at. 24th Air Force, that's how most people recognize the team down in San Antonio and really global. 14,000 men and women around the world. Really the cyber experts, the pros from Dover, if you will, in the cyberspace arena right now. And we present all of those forces through Air Force's cyber. So my counterparts in the service component perspective are Admiral Ty, Vice Admiral Ty on the Navy side, Lieutenant General Cardone on our cyber, Second Army, and then just recently, Major General Dan O'Donohue has come aboard for Vince Stewart, who was just moved over to be the director at DIA. So Dan has just come aboard as Mar Force Cyber. And so all of those forces get presented operationally to Admiral Rogers, his U.S. Cyber Command. And I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir, but I think it's important to set the stage there just to give you context. So if our AdCon chain is up through administration control, is up through 24th Air Force. Air Force's cyber is how we present those forces. And then the new logo, that meatball in the middle, Joint Force Headquarters Cyber. And you heard General Hawkins refer to the JFHQ Doden, which has just recently gone IOC on 15 January. There's also, each of the service components has been responsible for standing up a Joint Force Headquarters Cyber, and we provide support to the COCOMs. And I'll talk about that. That's been one of the challenges here recently with regard to COCOM support and this new cyber mission force. And when I move around and I talk to audiences like this, and especially downtown, et cetera, one of the questions with the feedback items we've gotten recently is, can you talk to us more about what that cyber mission force is all about? So we've actually put in a couple of slides just to give you a flavor for what's going on there. We can't get into the meaty details of the missions. Obviously, we get into some classified arena, but you see Steve Denker here on the front row. General Denker has got a classified session, so if you're heading over to that, I think he'll address some of the mission alignment and the types of work they're doing specifically. I think you'll find that fascinating. Next slide, please. And I've got the clicker. I'll get it. Habits are hard to break, aren't they? So I thought we'd level the bubbles just real quickly with regard to when we say cyberspace as a member of the military force, what do we mean? If you back up just really 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, right in that time frame is when you began to see this term cyberspace out in public. And as a member of the military, as a cyber warrior, responsible for worrying about how do you present forces cyber capability to combatant commanders, how do you defend combat capability against cyber threats, what do we mean by cyberspace? So let me just give you a little bit of a perspective. First, cyberspace is a domain. And we can argue about that or talk about that in the Q&A if you want. But the way we treat it in all of our services and in the joint community and interagency, and it's been a bit of a policy discussion, but cyberspace is a domain. And so there's cyber missions, and we talk about defensive and offensive missions, there's network operations, and we put the word cyber in front of those. But when we say cyberspace in the military, we're talking about a domain of operation. It's not a mission, it's not a functional area, it's not communications, it's not IT, et cetera. Cyberspace is a domain. And it's an interesting domain because it's man-made. So, when you move to air, land, sea, space, the other 4 domains of operation that we operate in, there's laws of physics involved. For instance, Bernoulli has a lot to do with the physics of flight. Newton has a lot to do with, mass and land warfare and what have you. Kepler has a lot to do with how we conduct operations in space. Those don't apply. I mean, maybe Moore's law applies in terms of the complexity, which we'll talk about in just a little bit, in cyberspace. But it's a man-made domain. It grows, it changes every day. You know, we're not making any more land, we're not making any more oceans. The air is what it is, and there's only so much space, even though it's a big place. But that's what's unique about cyberspace. And the primary architect, you know, is private industry, which is why we're having these discussions. And that creates a different set of challenges, opportunities, but different sets of challenges. And it was referred a couple of the panels yesterday with regard to the investment that is poured into this industry, into this cyberspace domain from a warfighting perspective, is that private industry drives the technology, the terrain, the capabilities in most cases. And so how do we partner, and then as a military member responsible for national security and providing those capabilities to the president, you know, what are those relationships with private industry? In addition, cyberspace is contested. And I think we used to argue about that a couple of years ago. Today, I don't think that's a problem, but it presents risk, not just to combat operations, and I'll describe what I mean by that in a little bit, but also to Main Street, Wall Street. It gets everybody's attention. It will highlight a couple of the most recent incidences, you know, Sony being the one that's captured most of the dialogue in the country and internationally lately. The other is that warfighting principles, things like economy of force, mass, speed, unity of effort, unity of command, apply, but they don't apply 100% in this man-made domain. And so they do present challenges. Cyberspace, I think we can all agree, is complex. It definitely challenges our existing policy framework, our legal framework. We spent a lot of time yesterday in a couple of the panels talking about a lot of the questions really focus in that area. So as a military member, when we present combat capability in the form of cyber missions, whether that's preserving command and control, it's really preserving the freedom of action for a commander out in the field, or trying to deny the same to an adversary or to a foe. In addition, C2 constructs, which are typically based on geography in terms of control in an area, are challenged in cyberspace because borders don't have a lot of meaning in this domain, right? And the speed with which things are happening drive it's a crucible of decision-making in terms of the OODA loop we're traditionally familiar with operating in. So we see from a command and control perspective, it definitely challenges our norms. What I'm seeing is, and it was referred yesterday in a couple of the forums, is becoming C-suite business in the military is quickly becoming commander's business. It's not the thing that's handled by the IT experts, the sixth community over in the corner. We used to, you know, the technologists, if you will, to provide those capabilities. And I'll just give you a quick anecdote. General Hyten referenced a C2 summit, a command and control summit out at Nellis Air Force Base about 2.5 weeks ago. 72 general officers in the Air Force in one auditorium having a discussion about command and control of forces for 2 days. The first day, each of the NAF commanders, the numbered Air Force commanders, to include myself, and the combat MAJCOM commanders had an opportunity to get on stage for 15 minutes. We were allowed 6 bullets on a slide broken up into three near-term challenges, and 3 challenges or issues associated with an A280 or contested environment. With only 2 exceptions across all of those NAF commanders and CMAJCOMs, cyber challenges made the list in the near term and or the long-term challenges. I would contend that if you had that dialogue, the C2 summit, if you look back 2 years ago, cyber was a sidecar issue. It was not front and center in the commander's arena. We're seeing it now. It is what's keeping commanders up at night out in the field. Not the cyber experts of the world, but commanders responsible for fielding combat capability. It's definitely necessary to understand, and you've got to be successful to succeed in today's fight. That's what we're seeing. As the 24th Air Force responsible for providing cyber capability to counterpart service component commanders, there's a high demand right now for cyber capabilities. The global domain is definitely complex. Don't preaching to the choir in this audience. But it grows exponentially. So that man-made domain, we're not making more space, we're not making more land, et cetera, but it is growing exponentially. And when you look at the figures, in 2018, there's supposed to be about 7.5 billion people in the world. So just as a frame of reference, when you look at the population at the end of this century, or this decade in 2020, 5 billion, almost the whole population of the world will be on the internet in an active manner. What attracts my attention in a lot of cases is this Internet of Things. 50 billion IP addresses, things tied to the internet in a very active way. By 2018, is the estimate for 50 billion IP addresses out there. Actively, not a web interface, but it's the cell phone, right, that we all are lashed to. I usually have two on. I left one in the room. I'd give you an indication. I was home over the holidays. We had the kids back. I have two kids. Wireless router. I was online and was doing some stuff, and it was reconfiguring something on the wireless router, and popped up, and there were 14 devices. There's only 4 people at the house. I'm like, what in the world is going on? 14 things actively. I'm like, why do I have 14 items? But what's amazing is when the kids come home, there's an Xbox that shows up in a suitcase and gets plugged in, right? And it's running wirelessly for gaming purposes. There's phones that are up, the laptops are open. And we don't even have electronic or connected thermostats and garage door openers and security systems in base housing. We don't have any of that. I can just imagine the 21st century homes in 5 to 10 years. There's gonna be 20, 30 devices hanging off those wireless routers. I mean, that's the kind of world we live in, right? It's pervasive in everyday life, whether it's Wall Street, Main Street, for us in the military and combat operations, it affects everything that goes on. Every soldier, sailor, airman, Marine is reliant, whether they know it or not, on cyber in some capacity to make their job more effective. It's borderless, talked about that. That really challenges the norms of behavior. It's increasingly faceless. What do I mean by that? Attributions can be a challenge, especially in a policy framework, when if you're going to have retribution for something, what action is going to be taken, what is going to be authorized. You better know who took the action against you before you unleash combat power against that individual or nation state. The additional piece is, the encrypted environment in this arena is increasing. We're seeing it more and more in terms of the traffic that's moving in and out of DoD networks. Unless you have deep packet capture, the ability to look inside that, but management of keys and privacy, et cetera, can be a challenge. And I know that's prevalent in industry today. So this Internet of Things is quickly becoming really an Internet of threats. So it was referenced yesterday that, by General Hyten, that we fight from our installations, right, from the bases. When we do surveys out on each of the over 100 installations, about 120 some odd installations, depending on how you count them up today, we see a potpourri of vulnerabilities in a lot of cases. We run pretty tight networks, but we're quickly seeing, I see SCADA systems that are lashed up into the network. We're seeing wireless accounts and LANs that are up and running on bases. And why do we do that? It's for efficiency, it's for business purposes. We're remoting a lot of instrumentation, so we don't have a technician sitting on the base full time. We're taking that data, and like we do everywhere else in this country, we're getting more efficient, much more productive with people and with information. But it is opening up conduits onto the base that don't require physical protection, but really an attack vector from cyber. And so that's quickly becoming a vulnerability that we recognize and we're focused on trying to resolve. So this proliferation and sophistication of threats. I think what attracts our attention is the numbers are obviously increasing, and to your left in the exploitation side, that's been going on for over a decade now. In the previous slide, you saw hundreds and hundreds of cases, so this could be littered with lots of logos. I'm not trying to pick on anybody. John Malloy always teases me because Auburn's on here and Bama's not. I'm an SEC football guy, and I love Bama, so it's not that I'm, there you go. See, I know what happened. When you move to the right, that's what's attracted attention. We used to talk 2-3 years ago We used to talk in the nuances of what if, right, in terms of destruction. And we used to show experiments and prototypes and demos of things, smoldering due to a cyber attack in a very controlled environment. We don't have to do that anymore. We can look down the right side of that chart, whether it's the Sands takedown, we got a nation state going after a private company, really in retribution for comments made by an individual. Sony, clearly from a policy perspective, nation state going after a country based on values and norms of behavior. Saudi Aramco, again, a nation state going after a pseudo company sponsored by, obviously, Saudi Arabia. One that I like to talk to audiences, you can fully appreciate it, but audiences that aren't well-versed, is the Stuxnet virus, which got a lot of attention, obviously, a couple of years ago. Won't get into the details of attribution and all that. But what's fascinating is when you look at the Stuxnet virus, a fairly sophisticated piece of cyber goodie, if you will, and used very effectively. Within about 2 to 6 months, depending on which timeline you look at, basically the source code that was used for Stuxnet was out in the wild, right? Let's compare and contrast that. I'm an Air Force officer, so let's compare and contrast that to an F-22 that's going to get fielded in terms of delivering some kind of combat effect. I would argue that Stuxnet was a combat effect in some regards, right? So when we go to build an F-22, we go to the design boards. When we finally begin to roll a prototype out, whether we do it in a very, secretive way or out in public, we're going to end up on a range. Somebody's going to obviously take a picture of it at some point. There will be a signature of that aircraft in testing that is pretty easy to capture, and that will take years to develop. We're going to begin to work tactics, techniques, procedures. We're going to build schoolhouses on how to field that capability and operators. And then we're going to roll that weapon system, the aircraft, out into the inventory, if you will. That timeline will take, in an ideal environment, 5 years, but really 10 to 15 years, right? For a piece of equipment, no matter what it is, to roll out into the force. Okay, so back up and look at Stuxnet. Clearly not as aggressive as an F-22, but clearly something that delivers and is capable of delivering combat effects within, even if it only took a couple of years to develop, within months, handfuls of weeks, that virus is now available out in the wild to anyone that wants it, right? Now, you still got to develop the access means to deliver it, the nuances of getting through security, et cetera. But the ability to escalate in this arena within the cyberspace domain, I think is what when we say growing exponentially, it's not just the domain, but the accelerated nature and the intensity of how this arena is and this mission set grows from a military warfighting perspective. Shaping key cyber terrain. General Hyten spent quite a bit of time on JIE yesterday, so I'm not going to go through a lot of that. This is really a reflection of much of JIE in this Internet of Things, in the drive to mobility within the military services. Just like any other organization, large organization, productivity is key. We're trying to get more efficient, save taxpayer dollar, get our jobs done with less resources, and be more combat effective. So mobility is obviously key to that. Security, we've got to have it. The JIE, in terms of a single security stack, being able to reach into coalition environments is going to be key. That is a huge demand we're hearing over and over again from the combat arms, whether that's MAJCOM commanders, combatant commanders out in the field on the joint side. That is a high need right now to get more normalized in how we handle coalition forces. But the protection of the data, segmentation of data is clearly key. But again, remember, this is a man-made domain, so we get a lot of choices in how this domain is built, how we field it. When we provision it and the way we operate it has a lot to do with how well we can defend it. We can't defend it all. And so one of the things we see over and over again now is we roll in with, I'll just pick a couple of examples. With USAFE, we're doing some work at the 603rd AOC. We're doing the same thing out at PACAF with the 613th AOC. The Air Operations Center for the Air Force is really key cyber trained. the ability to command and control Air Force, the air component via the JFAC or CFAC is key to our success. You ask any commander out there, that will be key. When we say defend, we don't mean this hard outer shell. We're really talking about not just the 6 community. We don't come in and work with the A6. We're really coming in and talking to the operations community about what are the key processes, what are the key mission flows associated with your AOC. Let's get the program office involved with the Falconeer program. What are the key terrain that we need to defend in a bad day? Let's just assume it's going to be a bad day. What pre-approved actions can we take in a very rapid sense as 24th Air Force have cyber? We don't need to come ask permission. We censor out, we characterize, lay out the mission flows. We identify that key terrain, the key missions that have to be performed, the ability to shut down certain activity. We censor up, we remote in, and then the goal is to be able to remote in and back out and operate from in garrison. So typically from San Antonio, and I'll talk about the cyber mission force here in just a second, but to put a maneuver force inside that space and work with CNDSB, the cyber network defense service providers, those capabilities on whatever mission system we're talking about. That's where we're heading. So when you think about warfighting principles, they apply. But it's a new arena. This isn't about just providing a service. This is being able to fight through a contested environment because you can see it coming. So we get a lot of questions about this new thing called the CMF. So I wanted to just spend a little bit of time referring to it and kind of normalizing the discussion here. If you back up about 2.5 years ago, let's see, General Alexander came forward and was really the architect behind a lot of this in terms of articulating the nation's need for a new maneuver force to do really 3 big things. First was to defend the nation, the critical infrastructure segments of the nation. And so there was a force built called the National Mission Team and the National Support Teams that backstop that. All services contribute to that. General Hyten referred to that yesterday as the Cyber National Mission Force. And so there's a headquarters, U.S. Cyber Command oversees that, controls those. Those forces report directly to the National Mission Force commander, which is Brigadier General Paul Nakasone, Army General. It reports directly to Admiral Rogers. Those folks have the authority when needed. They're given the authority to come down and backstop the critical infrastructure segments of the country. Fairly new. There's roughly going to be a little under 2,000 folks associated with that mission. The second mission is the COCOM support. So the combatant commanders out there, European Command, Pacific Command, Southern Command, Strategic Command, et cetera, have elements of the cyber mission force called cyber mission teams and support teams that backstop. They're there to provide options for those combatant commanders, both offensive and defensive options. And so I'll talk to you in the next chart about how those teams are built and what they're doing. So we have teams that are being built out of each of the services in support of the combatant commanders. And then lastly was cyber defense. There was a recognition that many of the maneuver elements, CV Hunt is probably the best example I think most people are familiar with, is one of the primary elements inside of the cyber protection teams to protect that key cyber terrain. So there are about 4 different flavors. There are some that do defense of the nation. There are some that are given to the combatant commanders for their activities. General Hawkins and the Joint Force Headquarters Doden team have a subset of the CPTs, and then each of the services has an allocation of CPTs to address their needs. And so General Hyten referred to that a bit yesterday and with regard to the defense of Air Force capability to provide mission assurance in that regard. I think that's where most of us all agree we're probably under-resourced right now, given the need to field when the F-22 comes into combat or the AOC is asked to do its thing, or a satellite is, the GPS system or an ICBM system. We bring that to bear on behalf of, from an Air Force perspective, on behalf of a combatant commander, the expectation is that operates effectively and has mission assurance baked into it, right? Not bolted onto it, but baked into it. The CPTs are part of that solution. So we're fielding this maneuver force, roughly 6,000 people total across the DoD. Our Air Force contribution is about 1,700, a little over 1,700 folks. If you include the overhead associated, we have about 2,000 new people that have been taken out of the Air Force and have been in other disciplines and have been added in terms of under the command and presented through AF Cyber. So new operators. The challenge right now is the command and control elements have not been resourced, and so that's been one of our challenges, which I'll talk about in just a bit. So from an Air Force perspective, this is what we look like in terms of fielding that force. I think a lot of times people think that it's all communications experts, cyber experts that are involved in these teams. In reality, this is a very ISR intensive mission set, at least the teams to the left. And so what you see in green are those resources in the form of people that are trained and brought to bear from 25th Air Force. And for those that don't know, last October, the Air Force ISR agency was redesignated as a combat numbered Air Force inside the Air Force. And so the NAF, 25th Air Force, my counterpart, Jack Shanahan, is responsible for providing those resources onto the teams. In the blue is what you see is 24th Air Force. Total numbers, a little over 1,000 folks come out of 24th Air Force, and a little over 700 folks are coming out of airmen, are coming out of 25th Air Force, bundled together in these teams and presented from a combat presentation of force through AF Cyber, through the authorities move through the person sitting in the spot that I'm in today. If you're looking at the math and you see, well, there's a lot more green on that chart, how come there's 1,000 people and something? We get that question quite a bit. It's because of the multiplier on the CPT front. So there's a lot more CPTs being generated, which is driving the numbers in terms of noses being generated out of 24th Air Force to make it a little bit heavier. Again, all of the authorities in terms of operational control, XORs, et cetera, flow from Admiral Rogers through me to the units, is how that works. If we've got any questions, we can get to the details. You can see the numbers of teams we're building across the Air Force. If you've got questions later on, we get into the classified arena pretty quick in terms of alignment. General Denker is going to walk through a good chunk of that in the classified session. So if you've got questions there and you're going to be attending that, that'll be the opportunity to ask a lot of questions there. I'll dodge and weave before then. So I thought we'd do is just walk through some challenges and opportunities. I think it's important, this is an amazing time. People ask me, so, you enjoy your job? I love my job. Oh my gosh, I pinch myself every day when my feet hit the ground, and I get to work with just amazing young airmen of all different shapes and sizes that have a lot of vim and vigor, and they're ready to get after the mission sets. Tremendous opportunity. There's definitely tremendous challenges. So it's this two-edged sword of sorts in a lot of ways. We've talked about the proliferation and sophistication of threats. If anything keeps me up, or not much keeps me up, I'm a pretty good sleeper, but that's a tough problem, and it's increasing in magnitude as we talked about. The other is resource stability. So anybody who's heard me talk, I always punch that. In these days of sequestration, if somebody could give us the resource profile over the next few years, we will make it work. We will figure out and be able to articulate the risk associated with those numbers. The challenge is, especially from the headquarters perspective, I do not envy the MAJCOM right now, is this volatility in the resources, not just in money, but in people, the number of people. The Air Force has been through a drawdown of sorts. We're leveling out, which is great news for the force. We've really run our young airmen. Some people have been through rifts and force shaping multiple times in the last 5-6 years. I think we owe it to the force to have some stability, civilian pay raises, those kind of things. We just need stability so that we can communicate that to the force. I think that's key. The JIE, I won't touch on that. We spent a lot of time yesterday talking about it. That is clearly strategically a must-go do. We've got to have that. That is giving us the operating environment in the blue space to be able to be more effective, both from a productivity perspective, being able to execute the mission, as well as a defensive capability. We talked about the added capacity. We're building a maneuver force. It is exciting. This year, today we have roughly, of the 1,700 people on the CMF, we have about 550 folks on board in various shapes and sizes of training and expertise right now. And you can see this year we will be ramping very, very aggressively and over the next 2 years. And so we are tuning the engines, changing the oil, fixing the props as this plane is flying, because we are conducting mission, but we are adding new capability, new capacity. It's a very exciting time. Definitely challenging, though, especially in a joint interagency environment. Multi-domain integration. I didn't touch on it before. We have got a lot of efforts partnered up with Jack Shanahan in the multi-domain integration. What do I mean by that? And the boss, General Hyten, referenced that yesterday. That is thinking about problems a little bit differently. It's not a cyber solution. It's how do we, as a combatant commander gives us a problem, says that's a hard target, or I need to defend that, especially on the offensive side. If directed, how do we get after targets in a more innovative way? Let me give you an example. We just did an experiment, and we can talk about it in public now. We ran an experiment off of a compass call aircraft, and we had a cyber operator sitting in the back. Wonderful experiment in terms of taking a cyber tool and being able to throw that off of electronically. You would think of it maybe as electronic warfare, maybe, but we're basically using the spectrum to put a cyber tool into a closed network on a range. Pretty powerful. So if you can extrapolate, is what would prevent us from doing that in a lot of different arenas to be able to get after targets that are tough to get to. And so we're toying around with how to do that in a contested environment. What does that look like? What are the skill sets required? Who has command and control? Because then we got a plane involved. We're using EW, so the EW guys are real excited about it. We got cyber involved. We're crossing a bunch of boundaries in a lot of ways. So the normal C2 construct that you would do to actually dictate timing and tempo associated with that is challenging. But we see that as not cross-domain, and it's not about ownership. It's about cooperating across multiple organizations to deliver an effect. And so we describe our guys at times affectionately as evil geniuses in terms of if we've really got tough problems, the younger generation is amazing. They don't care. But it's all of us old folks that are worried about lines on an org chart and who has control and all that. All that washes away. They look at what is the delivery of capability to a combatant commander. And so we've got between 24th and 25th Air Force a couple of projects that are running in that arena. It's exciting stuff. It's I think, very cutting edge. Command and control, I've talked about it and kind of referenced it several times. We have not resourced command and control of this joint cyber mission force. And we're asking this, the speed and the intensity of what they're going to do is rising. The capacity is coming in. And so when you look at, we have 4 Joint Force headquarters, cyber, Air Force being one. We have a National Mission Force headquarters, and we have a Joint Force headquarters, Doden. So there's really 6 at that echelon of command. Headquarters and command and control elements that have stood up. We're all operating off of different command and control suites. There's not a common command and control platform. And we have different arenas that require us to coordinate to deliver effects for a single combatant commander in many cases. We're working through that. I don't put the command and controls chart up because it just generates way too many questions. We're getting there, but this geographic boundary mindset that we tend to be in with regard to command and control typically does not apply wholly in this arena. And so that's driving some challenges. We spend a lot of time talking about that. Matter of fact, this afternoon, get on a plane, we're going back. We're actually going to roll out to our fellow component commanders some of the great work the team's doing with regard of integrating net ops, defensive and offensive activity into one. We'll call it an ATO. We call it an ITO, an integrated tasking order. We're using the Air Force construct of an ATO cycle just like we run in an AOC. Go figure where Air Force, that's the kind of command and control model we're typically going to bring. We've done a lot of work. We spent the last 2 years thinking about this and implementing it, and we think it's the right way to go. It's the ability to scale in a command and control sense across many regions, integrate passive activity, active activity in terms of a maneuver force and effects into kinetic operations or non-kinetic only, all in one tasking order, and give visibility to commanders in multiple regions. We see that as the only clean solution. And so it's been very, very powerful. Every component commander that's visited has basically embraced the construct tactically in terms of what we're doing. There's some nuances that are difficult. How do you blend a lot of security environments into one tasking order without taking everything up, because it's got to be transparent and discoverable on the other end. But we think it's the only solution that is able to be able to handle the speed with which we're conducting operations and to be able to scale in terms of the capacity that's building with this CMF and the maneuver force. We're really excited about it. We're going to be on stage tomorrow talking about it. We're taking our ROC Commander, Colonel Pyburn, out to do that, and looking forward to the feedback. We did highlight rapid cyber. It's worth just a few minutes to talk about rapid cyber acquisition. I think the Air Force probably has the best solution on the table. Not saying if I was to score us out, we're probably getting a B- right now, maybe C+ on it. We have a tiered acquisition strategy that allows, as the 24th Air Force Commander, I'm the only component commander across the services right now that have the ability to field capability if it's inside a breadbox of about 6 months and a couple $1 million. If there's an urgent need that I validate and coordinate with the headquarters, then can direct the rollout of capability in a very rapid sense. And so typically there's things that are going on in our labs or in our cyber solutions cell, and we're able to match capability to need and to get that onto the floor. And so that gets, I can direct OT&E efforts, fielding efforts, training, and put the -1 on the ground and get rolling. We've done it as fast as about 2 weeks for something that was sitting ready to go, cooked, and it was a matter of just making sure that the operators were trained. At times it'll take 12, 14, 16 months if it runs a little long, is some of the cases that have been there. But that's called a Rapid Technology and Ops Innovation, RTO&I, that resides with the 24th Air Force Commander. We think it's a great solution to small problems. Just to make clear, those are not ACAT 1, 2, or 3 programs. They don't breach into it. So the ability to give the authority to the 24th Air Force Commander, but then hold that commander accountable is the key. And so we're pretty excited about that. Then we have obviously the traditional acquisition, which I think you heard some of the frustrations being echoed yesterday. If we're going to put big upgrades out onto the network, hundreds of millions, tens of millions of dollars, today's rules, we're going to be forced into the traditional acquisition. The sweet spot we're really beginning to look at is this rapid cyber acquisition. It's a partnership between LCMC, 24th, and the MAJCOM at Air Force Base Command, primarily through the A5 and the A3 with Steve Denker. It's been, when it exceeds the RTO&I breadbox, we're getting up into the $10 million category over a couple of years. Can we push acquisition harder in that direction so we're not breaching through ACAT 3 program limits, which obviously kicks in oversight mechanisms, and allow us to get to unique capability onto the floor in the hands of operators in a more rapid sense. We've got some good examples, and we definitely got some bad examples there. We're looking at that hard. We're really pushing the envelope there. We've partnered between Colonel Donna Shipton and Colonel Rabbi Harris Simowitz, working together to be able to prioritize and push those efforts along. We think there's a lot of improvement there. We've still got a lot of work, but it looks fairly promising. And the last thing I want to do is touch on just force development. This domain is moving so fast. It's a challenge at times, but I'll have to say the Air Force is definitely leading the way with regard to force development. We compare and contrast notes with our joint service brethren. It's amazing how well we're doing. Our schoolhouses are running circles around the other services. There's a bit of envy going on when they look down at Keesler and at the Hurlburt crowd, is we're pushing our cyber operators and then also at a good fellow with the intel specialists that are coming through. We're doing really well there. So just one quick final thought. We talked about a lot of technology, we talked about policy, we talked about a domain that's moving very, very quickly. And a reminder is that none of it works well unless we put it in the hands of great operators, great personnel. I mean, it's the people. So I talked to our folks about mission, people, and partnerships. This is a shining example of the partnership piece in terms of building teamwork across, different segments, industrial, DoD, obviously. We've been talking about mission, but when it comes to people, they're the ones that are going to make it go. So I thought, just as a refresher, kind of a refreshing moment, is I'd love to highlight just a couple of the folks on this chart. I'm going to cheat so I don't mispronounce a couple of names, if I could. So in your upper left, there's a couple of Marines standing there, and they're talking to a young captain that's kneeling down. That is Captain Clifton Linday, and he's part of the 5th Combat Comm Group. He's deployed right now in a classified location supporting an Operation Inherent Resolve. And he's providing the comm network associated with all of the air operations that are going on. Primarily A-10 operations. Over 300 sorties have been flown over the last couple of months, combat sorties in support of ISIL. Those are the kind of people we're supporting day in and day out. If you move over to the far upper right, that is Staff Sergeant Matt Killian. And Matt's down at the 39th IOS down at Hurlburt. He's an instructor. He's teaching all of our CPT forces as they come through. In 2014, he trained over 200 CPT operators, primarily in CVA hunt capability. What's neat about Matt is he won the SANS Net Wars tournament. He brought home the trophy. So you got a guy that's out there, competing in environments like that and training our cyber warriors. Pretty spectacular. What'll be neat is when Matt rolls back into the force. You think he'll be a better operator because of that? Absolutely, absolutely. If I could, let's see. The gentleman in the red sweater is Mr. Frank Grillo. He's one of our senior engineers down at Keesler Air Force Base, part of the 85th Engineering Installation Squadron. I love it because he's one of our older folks. He's probably, I don't know how old Mr. Killian is, but or Mr. Grillo is, but he looks like he might be almost as old as me, so I love that. So he is working on a project with dense wave division multiplexing, the technology, and rolling that out. What is that being used for? It's to be able to leverage existing fiber optics networks across bases. So the next 2 projects are at Ramstein and out at Patrick, Cape Canaveral Air Force Base, to up by 40 times the amount of traffic we can move over existing infrastructure. You talk about innovation, we're leveraging what's going on in industry to deliver capability, and I think it's refreshing to see someone that's not wearing a uniform, because we tend to highlight that. But here you go, a senior engineer that's impacting, operators out there day in and day out. Very proud of what he's doing. The young airman that's standing there is a gentleman to the back up in the upper tier, young female airman, that's Senior Airman Autumn Foster. Lieutenant General Anderson is actually presenting her a medal. Senior Airman Foster was part of the contingent in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. She had laid in all of the networks, and we've provided support to that for all of the rocket and mortar attack defensive systems across, when I get the number right, I don't want to lie, 83 different sites. She was part of the 966 Air Expeditionary Squadron. What I love about Airman Foster is senior airman below the zone, and she's the Air Force's Cyberspace Operator of the Year in the airman category. Pretty squared away young lady. And here she is out deployed, being recognized by a 3-star general. Not bad, not bad. You think her mom and dad are proud about what she's doing? But that's the type of people we have out just kicking butt every day. The last person I'll highlight is, because I think it's important, and it's unique to the Air Force, is on the bottom left, that's Captain Chris Chin. He's one of our out of the first graduating class at the weapons school. He is actually out at Langley now at the NOSC, but he's teaching tactics, techniques, procedures. So in terms of bringing to bear warfighting principles, in terms of the plan, brief, execute, debrief mindset about what we do day in and day out. He's one of the first warfare, the WIC grads, as we call them, the weapons school grads out in our force. We track them like a hawk. We have 27 in the Air Force today. Captain Chin's one of those folks. When we compare and contrast our force with the other services, Admiral Tai and General Cardone in particular are very jealous of our 27 weapons school grads. 22 are active duty, 5 actually are total force, Guard reservists out in the force. And so we know where they're at. Why is that important? Because we're able to bring together tactics, the tips. There was a question earlier from Tech Sergeant. We're able to bring those tactics improvement program back in from the field and put those in implementation. And it's guys like Captain Chin that are out there that facilitate that discussion. We bring them together once or twice a year from across the Air Force to push the envelope with regard to both defensive capability as well as offensive capability. It's fairly unique to the Air Force, but I think bringing the warfighting principles into this arena, making it commander's business, that's one of the gentlemen that's doing that every day. So, you know, when I look at this picture, that's what makes this mission so special, is the people that are out there doing it every day. Now, they couldn't do any of it without the industrial partnerships, because the tools that are in their hands are coming out of this audience, really. So hats off, thank you for that. With that, I'm gonna wrap up, and I think we've got some time for questions, if you have some.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to ask a question,
Sorry, that was me.
please just stand where you are and a microphone will be brought to you so you can be heard. Wow, hey, this is good. Lots of people popping up. You said they wouldn't be shy, sir.
Dean was worried there wouldn't be any questions because it's so early in the morning. I said we typically don't have a problem with that.
Good morning, sir. Major Eric Bailey. I have a question. Straight ahead.
Got it. There's a lot
I have
of
a question about tying into your force development comment and then your last slide. So on the officer side, you've got Captain Chin, defensive guy, but this could obviously apply to the offensive side as well. In the upper left-hand corner, you had a tactical comm guy. How are we going to develop our officers to be able to either specialize in one or the other or cross between the two?
Great question. So I think as we move forward, Ed Wilson's opinion, and I think it holds true for just about any specialty in our Air Force, you need to master the tactical expertise as a young officer, as a CGO. And as you grow and you move into the senior CGO ranks, field grade ranks, I think it's incumbent upon us to give all of our officers the breadth. And here's what I mean by that. So when a young or a more senior 1-7 Delta or Sierra, I really don't care which one, shows up inside an AOC, they need to be conversant and understand the core principles, not just of being a service provider in the form of communications capability, but how to fight in a contested environment and how to reach to the capabilities. They don't have to be the expert. However, they need to be able to understand how to employ those capabilities on behalf of a combatant commander. That's the shift that we're going through. That's the culture shift, I believe, that's important for this force. And I don't think it's just with officers. I think, to be honest, it's just as important for our young and mid-grade NCOs. And to be honest, if we get it in the NCO Corps, that's where the bulk of our folks are, so they understand the warfighting principles. It's not just about the tactical expertise, but they understand why they're doing it and the threat that's out there. I think that's important. So does that answer the question? Great, good.
Yes, sir. Randy Mathis, Space A5I.
Hey, Randy.
Under a fully developed JIE and the CMF construct, what do you see the role of AFCyber, Joint Force Headquarters Cyber, from a full spectrum, DOTANOPS, Defensive Cyber Operations, and OCO, the role of the AFCyber and the Numbered Air Force in terms of operational C2 under those fully developed concepts?
Great question. So I think the authorities across the full spectrum will really fall to the AFCyber commander. So from an operational perspective, you know, 24th is an organized, trained, equipped set of authorities. And so I think sometimes we think the 24th guy, most of the authorities that are wielded day to day that flow through me in terms of accountability and also authorities flow through the AFCyber side in terms of presenting for combat forces, net ops, defensive ops, and offensive. So I think that's where the set of authorities are going to reside. When we talk about command and control, I think being able to have visibility, the boss talked about it yesterday, all the way through the network and the JAD with a single security construct is imperative. Today, we don't have that complete visibility. We have more visibility in the Air Force than the other services because we've gone through the AFNet migration and we have some standard architecture on the NIPR. We still got to change challenges on the SIPR side. We haven't been through a migration. As we move to JIE, I think it's imperative that we have that visibility. So from a command and control perspective, one, we need the situational awareness, and then we need to have the ability to maneuver in that space. So we're going to be a service provider from a net ops perspective. I think that resides with the AFCyber commander. And then defensively, we're having this discussion. Does the authorities reside in the Joint Force headquarters, or does that the service component? And it blends depending on which, remember, there's 4 types of defensive forces out there reporting in different places. A lot of them are Air Force. What we're seeing is the desire for our team, the OC, with my authorities, to C2 at the tactical level, so taking take-on of those forces. And the reason is because we're about probably 18, 24 months ahead of the other service components in that regard. I think that's going to be key. We know how to command and control the CPT forces, the maneuver forces inside Air Force spaces. I get uncomfortable trying to command and control an Army element and put them inside of a Navy key terrain that we're not real familiar with. That's a hard command and control problem. We're working through that. Today, we're very, very effective at taking Air Force force structure in the form of CPTs, maneuver force, working with Air Force CNDSP resources and enterprise resources at like the 33rd, the 26th, and the gateways, et cetera, and choreographing all those tactical actions. We're doing well. I give the team an A on that one. We're doing really well. We're able to scale it. The challenge is, okay, now let's talk about OCO on the offensive side. We've got to have visibility to be able to direct those actions. And as we take those actions in a pretty messy environment, we need to be prepared for anything that may be coming back at us, especially with regard to what I'll call DCORA, the responsive actions, which we don't control as a Joint Force headquarters. That's controlled out of the National Mission Force, so Paul Nagasone and his team. If that doesn't make your head hurt from a command and control perspective, there's a lot going on in that little bit of phrase that we just laid out. And so it all makes sense when you when you put it on a PowerPoint slide. It's very difficult. It's graduate level command and control. We're working our way through it. If I had to describe it, I think we're doing great on the net ops side. I think we're doing great on the defensive side. When you bring the OCO portions in, that's one of the challenges. How do you choreograph all of that action? Today, we're running them in a bit of stovepipes with some tennis shoes in between. We need to get to a common platform that allows us to have visibility to all of those forces. Does that answer your question? Great. Great, good question.
Good morning, General. Thank you for acknowledging Alabama football.
There we go. Sorry.
I'm Gail
You're a
Harris.
product of where you're from.
Grew up in New Jersey, summers in Alabama.
Here.
I'm Gail Harris, Policy Association, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that Cyber Command and its components are responsible for .mil, DHS is responsible for .gov. So if you have a scenario where the electric grids go down in Newark, Mobile, San Francisco, Minneapolis at the same time, and attribution is proven to be a nation state, who has a responsibility for responding to that? And a related question, is there an accepted international definition for what constitutes a cyber act of war?
So let me take the first one on the last question first. I think we're working through from a policy perspective the definition of a cyber attack. The norms of behavior are quickly changing. I think we're working through that. From our perspective, from where I sit, fortunately, as an operator, I don't have to make that decision. I'm told that a cyber attack occurred. We may be in the middle of trying to figure out attribution, but we're not going to be direct. Someone's going to tell us to take action. So I get the advantage of maybe stepping back from that discussion for just a bit with regard to the definition. And I don't mean to dodge the question because that's a tough question, but fortunately that's decision makers well above our pay grade, my pay grade, that are making those decisions. Our job is to present the capability and be able to articulate that, what we can provide. So the next question, or the first question was who's in charge of responses to that. Clearly DHS, especially in the .gov or downtown in the .com arena, especially with critical infrastructure. And I think, I can't see, I know Greg was here, Greg Tohill was here before. You know, they're going to be the lead. From a national perspective, the decision was made to stand some of the capability up in the Defend the Force, the Defend the Nation construct, to be able to provide support to downtown. Now that says that there's an authorities question as to should men and women in uniform be provided to support from a national defense posture, homeland security perspective, those kind of events or incidences. I think the answer is if they're capable and they're available, why not? We got to work through the authorities, but there's some unique talent that is being developed to be able to handle that. It gets back to what do the partnerships look like? Are we going to pick somebody, a Captain Chin in the middle of a financial company's networks? I'm not sure that's going to work well. So those are the pragmatic questions that obviously we're beginning to move into as we develop this force. When you look at the National Mission Force, it's really our ability to strike back, if directed by the president, at a cyber attack on the homeland. What are the options of being able to provide responsive actions, those options to the president? That's our job within the DoD. And so that's what that force is designed to do. Does that answer your question? Perfect. Thank you.
General, I think you have time for one more question, sir.
Okay.
Sir, back in the corner.
Got it.
Sir, Major Vic Norris from the NORAD and U.S. Northcom Joint Cyber Center. My question is related to the last two questions. Right now, in the Joint Cyber Center at NORAD Northcom, we work with 3 different Joint Force Headquarters cybers. We work with the NKIC from DHS and NCI-JTF from the Department of Justice, in addition to the National Mission Force assets. In light of that, what is the Air Force's priority and role in manning the Joint Cyber Centers? Because I didn't see them on the CMF slide. And how do you see that proceeding forward, specifically from a command and control perspective?
Great question. Did you talk to Greg Tohill? He hit me up in the lobby yesterday about that very question. I've got soldiers and I've got sailors sitting inside his ops. There's no airmen that have been dedicated to that front. So there's a question there, and I've got an action after this conference. I was not aware that we did not have Air Force representation, at the national level. Question mark when you go figure that out. What is the role of the Joint Force Headquarters? To be honest, we look to U.S. Cyber Command to be the voice into that interagency discussion there in the NCR. We take direction from U.S. Cyber Command in terms of our response options or support defensive constructs in terms of information flow. Maybe the one exception would be we have a very mature relationship with Air Force OSI on the law enforcement side. And so that in San Antonio. And so we have senior representation that sits with us inside of our ops centers. And it's really for law enforcement purposes, but it also helps inform through FBI channels, et cetera, what's going on. It's not really a back channel, it's just there's a whole set of missions there that we support, collecting criminal evidence for prosecution and those kind of things on our Air Force networks. And so that helps inform. But we typically look to U.S. Cyber Command as the lead DoD element into the interagency discussion operationally. That's the focal point. Otherwise, you got too many voices coming from the service components. It's better to have a leader-follower arrangement in that regard, and I think it works well. It's about the only way to scale and to be able to be responsive. Some people would argue maybe there's too many echelons there, but I think it simplifies the discussion up at the national level, and so I think it works pretty well right now. I think we're maybe underrepresented from having airmen in the seat, and we're going to go work on that. Does that address your question? Great. Okay. Super. I'm going to defer.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of Rocky Mountain Chapter of AFCEA, it's always great to hear the issues that you're challenged with at the pointy end of the spear. So we appreciate you taking the time and making our symposium better. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Dean. Appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to our last morning break. This one is sponsored by Northrop Grumman. So please be back in about 30 minutes for our morning panel. Thank you.